First tonight, the scrapping of Sussex Street. Sussex Street has been the legendary nickname of the Australian Labor Party's political culture, with its sometimes ruthless expediency in New South Wales and nationally. Now, through the sensational ICAC allegations of avarice and corruption, State Labor wants to move its headquarters to Parramatta. It's a symbolic gesture, part of reforms under consideration. Too little, too late?
We have to smash the factions. We have to make sure that we don't end up with the circumstances like we find ourselves in now ever again.
You heard it here first. John Robertson, leader of what's left of the Australian Labor Party in the New South Wales Parliament, last night set out his ideas for party reform. Direct membership election of the party leader, background checks and pre-selection primaries, searchable websites for pecuniary interests, including for spouses, an end of factional power. Now all this apparently more urgent as the ICAC investigates Labor in government.
Mr Obeid, any comment?
In fairness, it should be noted the ICAC investigation is not exposing Labor Party organisational or union corruption as such. It's inquiring into the alleged abuse of power by Eddie Obeid, the former head of a faction within the state parliamentary Labor Party. The ICAC alleges that Mr Obeid and his extended family and business associates corruptly received confidential information about lucrative mining licences from then Minister Ian McDonald. Nevertheless, Sussex Street, already damaged from last year's drubbing at the hands of voters in the state election, is being called to account to explain how its factional system was allowed to be manipulated for what the ICAC alleges is corruption on a massive scale.
It looks like there have been people in the Labor Party who have sought to use the Labor Party for their own personal advancement and their own personal gain.
Last night at Sussex Street, opposition leader John Robertson confronted the impact of the ICAC's inquiry into his party's already diminished standing with the voting public.
And that's why I have suspended Ian McDonald, Eddie Obeid and Eric Roosendahl, and I will not hesitate to suspend anyone else who appears before ICAC with the sorts of serious allegations that are being made before the ICAC now.
Among his now long list of reforms, he supports the scrapping of Sussex Street and moving party headquarters to Parramatta.
I think it's a great idea. I think it sends a pretty powerful message about we're serious about cultural change within this party, because some of the change needs to be operational and some of it needs to be cultural, and we need to do both of those things at the same time.
As well as the suspensions of Roosendahl, Obeid and McDonald, the party has also expelled former Minister Tony Kelly after a corruption finding. ICAC Commissioner David Ip QC has called evidence from two former premiers, Maurice Yemmer and Nathan Rees, and significantly questioned them about the demonstrable power of former MLC and power broker Eddie Obeid through what was known as his Terrigal's fraction, so called because it was formed at Eddie Obeid's Central Coast Beach House at Terrigal.
So few individuals have such enormous power where the pursuit of the power becomes the game of politics.
By the time this commission and any subsequent proceedings are over, that there will be a very clear delineation between those men and women who are the hearts and soul of the Labor movement and others.
Under oath, both former premiers truthfully had to acknowledge that when it came down to it, Eddie Obeid had more power than they did. They explained to the ICAC that the Obeid Terrigals had a majority within the party's right or centre unity faction. This was how power was factionalised in the New South Wales State Parliamentary Labor Party during the last term. In a party room of 70, the formal left faction had around 22 members. The right or centre unity faction had the rest, 48 members. Within the right faction, the Terrigals had 25 members, therefore dominating centre unity. On key policy questions and leadership, centre unity would hold separate faction meetings to vote and decide, the decision binding on all members of the faction. With the Terrigals dominating, their preferred policy or candidate would be decided on, and then through factional discipline, all Centre Unity members would be so bound in the subsequent full caucus vote, even showing colleagues their voting papers. With the left in the minority, the right would win, dominated by the influence of the Obeid Terrigals.
It tells you that a small number of people, provided they control the dominant sub-faction, can use that power to, in a sense, parlay their control into the entire party. I mean, ICAC, I guess, is...
Labor campaign consultant Bruce Hawker, who came to national prominence as a mouthpiece for Kevin Rudd last February, says after the ICAC revelations, the Labor Party had to reform or wither on the electoral vine. It was now facing defeat in many New South Wales now marginal federal seats in next year's poll, as voters acted on their distrust, now compounded through the ICAC revelations.
I think right now it's facing one of its greatest challenges.
It is clear that the current power balance, the current power structures have enabled too much disgraceful conduct and arrogantly corrupt behaviour.
From Melbourne this week, New South Wales Labor Senator John Faulkner set down 7 reform ideas for Labor, the most pertinent to address the subversion of the party by malign but well-organised elements within the factions. Bruce Hawker says the experience of Canada's NDP, New Democratic Party, an ALP equivalent, should be taken as a guide for reform here. In Canada, all party members elected the leader. Unions could not dominate party forums as donations or capitation fees were prohibited, forcing membership to be inclusive, empowered and broadly based.
Today, the NDP has nearly 100,000 members, and going from 13 members in 2002, it now has 103 members in the National Parliament and is on course to be the next government of Canada. That's what happens when you embrace the challenges of the moment and change for the better. That is a totally revitalised party.
Mr Williamson, tell us, what do you intend to do with these charges? Will you defend them?
Another issue undermining voter confidence in Labor federally is the New South Wales Fraud Squad Strikeforce Carnarvon inquiry into malfeasance in the Health Services Union. The party's former national president and former HSU president, Michael Williamson, is facing 20 charges. Mr Williamson's ALP membership has been suspended. He is entitled to the presumption of innocence, but the charges against him and ongoing police inquiries into his union's governance resonate politically.